Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on the 5-part prologue anime to Final Fantasy XV, the game Brotherhood Final Fantasy XV. I watched all 5 episodes back to back of this series, absolutely loved it. Even though I will probably never be able to actually play Final Fantasy XV because I can't afford the modern, consoles, and I really can't afford the games and all that kind of stuff. It's been like that for a very long time. I've just loved immersing myself in this world that they're building. The characters, the characterizations between this and Kingsglaive Final Fantasy XV, the fully CG, full-length animated feature to do with, Nyx Ulrich and the Kingsglaive, the elite force of the King of Lucis and all that kind of stuff. Whereas that was the focus for Kingsglaive, the film. This anime prologue is very much sort of a, focusing on Noctis, the King's Prince son, and his crew, his compatriots, who you will, basically be traveling around with and playing as in the game when it does finally release. And this is really getting down to the nitty-gritty of how these characters met, what made them become friends, how they became Noctis's party, in a sense. And it's really cool, starting with the second episode, which is probably my favorite. You have the focus being on Prompto, the blonde guy, and you see as a flashback, basically it goes from the present day where they're traveling and Prompto is driving the car, almost, hits a little dog, a little puppy in the road. He swerves just in time to miss the dog, and this recollects to his mind back when he had found a little wandering puppy as, I guess, a middle schooler or a high schooler, where he was a little more plump, a little more chunky, chubby, whatever you want to say, loved his fast food burgers and everything like that. And he had actually taken this little puppy in because it was wounded. He had healed the puppy and been taking care of it. He was going to make flyers to try to find out who the owner was. And it turns out, this puppy sneaks away at one point, and we learn that it's actually Princess Lunafreya's. Lunafreya being a character who is of some prominence in the Final Fantasy XV game, but also we see her, very much in Kingsglaive Final Fantasy XV as well. And she is essentially the romantic interest for Noctis. They knew each other as children. When they met, it was a period when Noctis was almost killed by the Niflheim, sort of empire, and only just barely was he saved by his own father, King Regis, as they escaped. And but because of the interests between Lunafreya and Noctis, when they figure out, because of the bandage that Prompto puts on the little puppy after it returns to Lunafreya, it has his name on it. Does she send a letter to him, like congratulating him, thanking him, and saying, if you are a friend of Noctis's, remain friends with him, protect him. And so Prompto really, suddenly he has this princess who is really counting on him in his mind to make friends, to break bread with Noctis, and he feels like he can't do it right away because of his chubbiness, and he's kind of he stumbles over himself. It's really funny. He just feels like he doesn't live up to the task. He can't live up to the expectations of the prince, being so bumbling and being so like knocking things over and everything like that. So he actually begins running and exercising, and he does this apparently to either high school or college, to that level. And finally, when he's lost a lot of weight and he's really got himself physically fit, does he finally try to get closer to Noctis. And Noctis barely recognizes him because they ran into each other a few times in the past. And he's actually very easygoing, and they're fast friends. And I love that it ties. I think the reason why it's my favorite episode out of all of the 5 episodes of Brotherhood is because you see, Prompto being such a compassionate soul. Even though he's eating fast food and everything, he's an animal lover. He helps these 2 little puppies, and one in the modern day, one in the past, which led to this friendship, this burgeoning relationship between he and Noctis, and this is what brought that about. And he's so consumed with meeting Lunafreya when they finally, this is where they're traveling in the present day to go see her. He desperately wants to meet her and, I guess, introduce himself. I'm the prompto. I'm the one you sent the letter to. I'm the one who saved the little doggy, you know. Like, you're the one who put me on this path to be Noctis's friend and all this stuff. It's just really heartwarming and fun, and I just love it. He's a goofy character. He's probably the most goofy out of all of them. He calls himself a self-professed plebe, and that he's not good enough, but he's going to try his hardest and everything, and that's very much what comes across with his character. Now, somewhat different to that, in the third episode, do we have the focus being on Gladiolus, who is kind of like, you know, he's basically the one who's meant to protect overall. Overall, all three of these characters are meant to protect Noctis, but Gladiolus especially, and when you see the flashback, you know, he's trying to train Noctis. Noctis is really, as a young man, he's lazy. He doesn't really care to concern himself with becoming a sword fighter and learning those skills, learning those battle skills and all that kind of stuff, and sparring and all this whatever. He doesn't have a mind for it. He's not really taken on that responsibility as yet. And so Gladiolus cannot stand him. He hates him to the very fiber of his being. And what's really interesting is how the bread is broken between them. It actually has to do with Gladiolus's little sister Iris, who, you know, she, because of how much her brother talks down about Noctis, she knows he's the prince, and she can't quite wrap her mind around, well, aren't you supposed to protect him and be his saving grace and like him, but you don't like him? Like, she can't really understand, so she wants to meet Noctis by herself, or for herself. And it's interesting, she sneaks into, you know, the kingdom, and they find her. Gladiolus is really ticked off, but some of the higher-ups are like, well, it's okay, since you're here, you know, you can go ahead and have a little sit-down, get-together with Noctis. And she sees this cat wandering through a garden, like internal garden area, which leads to the outer regions of, you know, the castle or whatever it is. And she's following this cat, and Noctis ends up seeing her without knowing who she is, and thus starts to follow her as well, out of curiosity. And she eventually gets lost, and it starts raining, and like it's all kinds of trouble for her. She falls down a hill, possibly you know, potentially very severely injuring her leg and all this kind of stuff. And were it not for Noctis being right on her tail, he wouldn't have been able to save her, bring her back, you know, to the kingdom, where basically he then takes on the responsibility. He says, he basically lies to his father, the king, saying, I asked her to come out and play with me, and it was really my fault. You know, he didn't want to bring disgrace on Iris or Gladiolus, because Gladiolus probably would have been sent packing at that point. You let this kid in, you let her run amok, and, you know, you're supposed to be protecting my son, and get out, you know, that kind of thing. And when Gladiolus later finds this out, when Iris, you know, tells him the truth, does he have a newfound respect for Noctis? And it's really cool, because then he goes back to Noctis, and they're kind of sparring again, and they really sort of reach a level playing field, as far as, you know, he's thanking him for covering for his sister, but I'm not going to go any easier on you. You know, you don't think you're going to get off lightly just because I'm thanking you now, and all this stuff. And their whole sparring dynamic, it kind of reminds me, for those who are anime fans, of the relationship between Prince Zen and his elder brother, Prince Izana, in Snow White with the Red Hair. Only it doesn't, you know, quite end as friendly as this particular relationship. And all of this whole sparring flashback has to do with, you know, they're battling in the present day, these robot sort of soldiers that are being sent by the Niflheim Empire to hunt Noctis down and kill him. This all being after, you know, the downfall of the Lucis kingdom and his own father, the king, as we see in Kingsglaive, Final Fantasy 15. The fourth episode is much to do about Ignis, the sort of servant and right-hand man of Noctis, And there's some question as to what got him baking sweets and all this kind of stuff, kind of harkening back to another currently unfolding anime as of the time of this recording, Amamoto Inazuma, where you have the main character's high school chum having, been making sweets for him, and they're kind of like, well, what turned him on to that, In the case of Ignis, do we find out while he is trying to get the young man that Noctis is, this is kind of like early high school days, I guess, because we see that he's just palling around with Prompto for the first couple years or whatever. His apartment is absolutely a mess, that is to say Noctis's. He's irresponsible, even more so than he was as a child when, Gladiolus was trying to teach him to spar and all this kind of stuff. Ignis he sits in on all the governmental political reports, all of the reports about what the Empire is up to and the worries and concerns that raises within the kingdom of Lucis. And he's supposed to pass these reports on to Noctis, but Noctis just doesn't care. He doesn't want anything to do with it. And they're really butting heads. Ignis is trying to break ground in that he's trying to make a dessert that Noctis had when he was a kid, back when he met Lunafreya before they were attacked by the Niflheim Empire at that time, because this dessert just was like the greatest thing Noctis ever had. And so Ignis is taking on making sweets by trying to recreate this dessert, and he's not getting it. He can't quite get it to perfection, to Noctis's taste. And he's doing this all the while trying to implore Noctis to be more responsible, to take care of cleaning up after himself, to focusing on some of the political aspects as well as his school studies, and to weigh all of this stuff. I mean, you're really seeing how much weight it is putting on Noctis's shoulders, because a lot of it has to do with, a lot of his reluctance has to do with confronting the idea that he will one day be king, but that means that his father would thus have to die. And he doesn't want to think about losing his father. And this is really a poignant sort of aspect of the story, as it ties into the overall story arc, if you will, of Noctis confronting that reality that his father will not be around forever. And in the modern sense, per Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15, is he taken out by the Niflheim Empire? And so, Noctis is very much having to confront that whole aspect and really deal with it. And it takes him so many years, and the guidance and the support and the friendship of these three friends, to really get that across. And when he finally lays that bare for Ignis in this past framework, do we see a burgeoning breaking of the bread between them as well, in a similar fashion, where they're butting heads just as he and Gladiolus had, but they begin to be fast friends at the end of the day. And so the entirety of this 5-episode prologue to the game is bookended from the first episode to the final episode, the 5th and final episode, with this demon sent by the Niflheim Empire, this giant snake woman sort of thing with 6 arms and a ton of swords. And like, this thing apparently had attacked Noctis and tried to take him out as a child, wiped out his escort and everything like that. And his father, King Regis, only just barely sent the thing packing. He couldn't kill it, but he managed to save Noctis's life as a child. And this is, again, what really touchstones and hallmarks that longing and missing his father that Noctis has yet to confront. Because he and his 3 compatriots, they all, as they're traveling, come under the attack of this same creature, the same demon beast, and they manage, by banding together, to take it out. But Noctis, you see the turning point in his character, in his maturity in confronting the loss of his father, through his actions in the battle. The battle itself is absolutely mesmerizing, and at one point he's thrown into like the water off a cliff, and when he comes back out of it, he's using the teleporting ability that you see in Kingsglaive, which I was so impressed with, that Nick Ulrich was using. And he teleports back out of the water onto the edge of this cliff face and summons all of these sword weapons floating around him, much as the power was wielded by his father, the king, thus really tapping into that idea that Noctis is, the heir to the throne, and he is the next to be the king, because now he wields the king's power in the absence of his father, the king. And so they behead this freaking thing. They cut its arms off. They take it out. It's absolutely beautiful, the entire action sequence. And finally, this is where Noctis, once it's all said and done, falls to his knees, recollecting his father being there by his side as he woke up after the first attack as a child by this creature. And his father never left his side. And he's finally able to cry and sort of call out longingly to his father, very much resigning to himself that everything he had still wanted to say to his dad, and you know, all of the thanks, all of the gratefulness, the wisdom that his father passed on to him, the protection and all that kind of stuff, and thank him for all of that, he would no longer be able to, because his father is gone, thanks to the hands of the Niflheim Empire. And again, this is all precursor, prologue to the Final Fantasy 15 game, which will see Noctis and his party, you know, on their journey to try to get to Lunafreya, the princess, his romantic interest, all the while battling the Niflheim Empire and its various, you know, different vestiges, all these different characters who represent the Empire who will be coming after them. And I just, you know, the animation was exquisite. It was absolutely gorgeous. You know, the choreography and the action and battle sequences was great. The camaraderie between the characters, the relationships, the characterizations. I absolutely loved this 5-part prologue, Brotherhood, Final Fantasy 15. And I can't give it any higher a praise, you know. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen Brotherhood, Final Fantasy 15, it's available on YouTube, on the Final Fantasy 15 official channel, and elsewhere abroad as well. You know, what you thought of it, love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. And so, yeah, otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.